Remote work has become increasingly more common in recent years, but in the last few weeks, it's practically compulsory. Amid the rapid changes made to accommodate a new remote workforce, many organizations are challenged to scale their resources to ensure their workers have secure access to the systems and the tools they need to maintain business continuity. In this webinar, I'll be talking to Citrix Chief Technology Officer Christian Riley and Upwork Vice President of Product and Engineering Mike Paler about how they've approached these challenges, not only historically with their teams, but in the face of the crisis. First of all, I would like to introduce Christian. Talk to us a little bit, Christian, about your scope of work at Citrix and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, and hi, everybody. I'm Christian Riley, Global CTO here at Citrix. And I guess you could think about my team in two very simple ways. We are really the bridge between our business strategy and our customer advocacy, meaning that we get the responsibility of effectively creating the technology strategy for Citrix as a company. So obviously, huge amounts of interaction that we have with the technology industry at large, and also with our customers globally. And of course, I'm happy to talk to you about some of those things that we've seen today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Christian. Mike, talk to us a little bit about your scope of work at Upwork.
Sure. Thanks, Tim, and hi, everybody. My name is Mike Paler. I'm the VP of Product and Engineering for Upwork. My teams build the Upwork.com platform for finding on-demand talent, and I also run several groups at Upwork, including trust and safety and payments teams. And so we effectively work in a globally distributed way to build the platform.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, let's get started with the questions here. If we could go full screen on the video. Thank you. First question, I'll throw it to you, Christian. Share how you've built your remote team and what some of the initial challenges you faced are and how you dealt with them.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. So I think perhaps somewhat uniquely, certainly from other companies I've talked to who have CTO offices of similar size and scale to the one here at Citrix, my team by definition is 100% remote. And I think partly that's due to a couple of reasons. Number one, the culture within Citrix, which is very supportive of remote working in general. Secondly, we have the technology to allow us to do that, of course. And I think thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, we cover a vast area of the world. We have customers literally in all four corners of the globe. And so part of the original construction of the team was to identify the strategic locations where we would need to put the talent to best serve the needs of our field and therefore our customer advocacy. And then also just trying to find talent in general and trying to find the best talent actually led us to some locations that we would not necessarily have chosen. So it's a combination of looking at it from a strategic perspective, where we find the best bang for the buck in the places that we need to put our people, but then also trying to find a very set of specific skills and experience that we required to make the CTO office functional. And of course, that led us to some interesting locations around the globe. So, pretty interesting story. We are 100% remote. We've been 100% remote since the birth of the recent incarnation of the team. And it works great for us. We have some local expertise in some really interesting areas around the world. And of course, I think you need that when you're trying to cover as much of the globe as we do, but also to have the skills and expertise that we need to truly interact strategically with our customers around that world.
Yeah, the culture at Citrix embraces remote work. That's something I want to double click on a little bit here. By embracing remote work, it seems like, Christian, you've done something many of your competitors haven't. You've liberated yourself from, I call it that tyranny of local choice, where we have to find talent in the offices where we do business. Talk to me a little bit about how that liberation kind of opened up the palette for you to get best person for the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, fundamentally, if you take a look back at the history of Citrix and the success that we've had, I think most people in the industry would tell you that they consider us to have been the pioneers of secure remote work. And of course, that's evolved over the last 20 years or so, to where we are today. But I think once you have that, and once you have that at the heart of the company, building the products and solutions and services that allow other customers to do that, by definition, you are a company that does that. So that's the DNA of the company that's at our heart. I think the other side of it is much more around the culture. One of the things that we see over and over again, and I'm sure Mike will talk about his experiences, that to find that talent, to nurture that talent, and to make that talent successful, You have to have a culture that trusts that talent to be productive, that trusts that talent to be engaged, and trusts that talent to be successful. And I think once you have, the technology and the philosophy and the DNA, but you also have the culture of the company that allows that, that was really a perfect marriage for us to go out and find the talent in all those locations that I talked about around the world, knowing that, we can bring them together with the technology, but we also trust them to get the job done.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Mike, I'm going to throw the same question to you. Talk to me about how you built your distributed team and what were some of the challenges you faced and how did you deal with those?
Sure. So just to piggyback on what Christian said a little bit, we really wanted to find the most skilled professionals we could. And if you look at the locations that we're in, traditionally the San Francisco Bay Area, it's a hotbed of talent for certainly, but it's hard to find all the skilled talent that you need anywhere in the world. So we leverage our platform for that primarily, and we find talent all over, and that helps us build functions for engineering, data science, operations, really any key function at Upwork. And my organization is around 80% remote, and we leverage our talent on the platform as well as all over the country and the globe. So we're actually set up so that we can do distributed and sort of autonomous responsibility for different services, different parts of our system or our platform. And it's a nice setup. Like as Christian said, you've really got to have the company DNA and the culture to do that effectively. And I think more and more companies are moving in that direction. Once you enable that, you can find talent anywhere. And that's the beauty of adopting that model. We do that very happily. We drink our own champagne, we like to say, but we have the setup internally, the culture and the DNA is there. We've been doing it for 15 plus years, and we've been pioneering remote work securely for that period of time. So I think it's an interesting time that we're in right now where people are just exploring this a little bit more. They're working on the basics, trying to get their infrastructure up, to get everything ready, but they're learning how to collaborate and work together more. I think they'll find that, they can look globally now for talent, and that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch over the coming months as people adopt to the new normal.
So aside from the technology and the sourcing piece, which you both talked a little bit about, top 2 management challenges for leading a remote team. I think we'd love to hear what you think those challenges are from a managerial style standpoint and how you've addressed that. I'll start with you. Mike.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is just, number one, embracing it. As we talked about, the culture has to be there, so everyone has to embrace it. You have to think about it first. When you go into a meeting, when you go into a project, you have to think about how to do this effectively in a distributed way. I think consistency of processes and scalability of those processes are huge variables that factor into doing this well. You have to think through like centralizing and looking at the process itself and saying, how do I scale this in a most distributed, remote friendly way? And I think the typical challenges in technology are time zones, obviously communication tools, remote ability to collaborate on code or designs or, product specs, anything of that nature. So I think as you sort of look at embracing it, you have to look at how to do things a little bit asynchronously, right? You have to do things real time as well. I mean, I think you have to look at your processes and think, how can I best do that in a remote distributed way? And, at Upwork, we like to think about it first and foremost. It's our default. I think we have thousands of employees that are remote, and so it's a default for us. And I think thinking about that ahead of time, looking at how do we hire, how do we get projects done, how do we innovate globally, how do we make teams feel autonomous and have the ability to make decisions and effectively deliver without a central, governance structure that's too centrally located in one particular office. Those things you have to build into your processes, into your culture, the way you communicate with each other, and I think those go a long way in helping teams adopt to this sort of methodology. And so the challenges can be overcome by just looking at your processes and looking at them, saying, are they remote friendly? Are they distributed friendly, right? How do we make decisions? And where they're not, just breaking them down and figure out how do you rebuild that and do it in a better way.
Great. Christian, I want to throw that question to you. Managerial style, what are the top 2 challenges you face and how do you address those?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one very similar to what Mike would observe, but I think I would perhaps clarify the first one as balance, and by that I mean, when you have remote teams, when you have people who are in these far-flung locations, and in some cases working pretty much on their own, as part of a larger fabric, but focused on very sort of singular things that their expertise are there for. I think the challenge is, and when I say balance, I mean really around communication. It's very easy for people to feel disconnected, and striking that balance of communicating enough so that they know enough about what's going on, they know about where their contribution matters, versus over communicating because they are remote as individuals or remote as teams, where I can't separate the signal from the noise and I don't really understand the priorities. And of course you do lose a certain dynamic. I mean, I've been around big organizations all my career, and yes, there's value in the water cooler, but I think there's also a lot of lost productivity in big office settings where there are too many distractions, frankly. So I think that balance is really important. And I think the second one, and again, I'm very fortunate to have seen this all over the world in sort of my previous career and also here at Citrix, is really understanding deeply the culture of the locations that the people are in. Because not all remote work and all work from home in the US looks the same as it does in India. It doesn't look the same as it does in the Czech Republic. It doesn't look the same as it does in the Philippines. It doesn't look the same as it does in New Zealand. So I think just understanding, a little bit about the local cultures, really immersing yourself in that as a manager to understand that, and obviously then managing the team to be respectful of those different cultures.
First, that's a great answer. Thank you very much. And you're right. You hear the bloggers for the last few weeks telling everyone, well, over communicate. But what you both know is that at some point you get up and you just face email bankruptcy during the day. You just can't get to all the over communications. It's a good point. I've got to do a follow-up here, but first of all, I want to say to anybody watching, if you want to ask a question for the interactive Q&A, just send it via email, wwl@upwork.com. wwl@upwork.com. Quick little follow-up here. Culture, you've now mentioned it between the two of you 20 times. It's a good thing it's not a drinking game, right? But culture is obviously very important. John Chambers at Cisco Systems once told me that culture is a conversation led by leaders about how we do things here, and he said it's about cadence. So I want to start with you, Christian. Talk to me about how you not only pass along your cultural ethos at Citrix in your cadence with remote workers, but how as a listener, you also pick up on their unique cultural norms in country.
Yeah, so I mean, I think based on the makeup of my team, the locations and the scope that we have, we are, I would say, sort of natural innovators. And the culture of a technology company, and I'm sure Mike would say the same thing, has got to be innovation as part of the culture of the company. So from a managerial perspective, fostering that innovation, whether that's technology innovation, whether that's partnership innovation, whether that's commercial innovation, I think that's probably the number one thing that we work on as a team. Our goal really is to challenge status quo. That's really what we're there for, whether that's on the roadmap, whether that's in the strategy, whether that's in the way we go to market. Obviously bringing in other teams across the globe and other departments within Citrix to do that. But I think, the notion of being innovative, but also doing that with one of the other values of Citrix, which is really around courage. You need courage to survive in the technology industry. You need courage to bet big on different types of products. You need courage to bet big on different types of working models, exactly as Mike was alluding to. So I think as part of the cadence that we have, we're always questioning each other around innovation. Are we doing enough? Are we bringing enough innovation into the company? Are we investing enough time in understanding our customers' innovation so that we can drive those alignments? And I think, if you were to sort of pin me down and give me, what one opportunity to answer what I think is most important for my team and also for the company as a whole, it's really making sure that those innovation engines are fired up and delivering to what customers really need.
It's great. That's just excellent. And it sounds like when you have conversations, almost every single time you're getting back to either the values or the mission. Is that a consistent part of how you interact with remote workers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would say that is a foundational set of cultural values within the company. Our executive leadership team, our CEO all the way down, embody those values. They push the organization to do things with integrity, of course, to do things with respect, to work together. All those things that you would see that you can put these things on a whiteboard, or you can put them in the hallways, but you have to live them. You have to walk the talk. You can create as many mission statements or value statements as you like, but ultimately everybody in a leadership position through the entire hierarchy of the company has to embody those. And I would think that, my observation is that, especially as now we've got over 8,000 people working from home, those values are extremely important, especially the one that we talked about, trust, and making sure that everybody in the company believes that they are doing the best they can do in a situation that is incredibly unusual.
And to put a bow on that, it's not just distributed teams. What you're advocating is distributed cultural teaching. So I love that idea. It's not posters on a whiteboard or the occasional top-down speech. It's everyday conversation. That's great. Mike, just a quick throw to you. I know that you talk a lot about how we communicate. That must be a part of how you communicate Upwork's culture. Talk to us just a little bit about how you incorporate that into your daily management cadence.
I think you mentioned it earlier, Tim, like we need to be over communicating a little bit. I think that we need to be reminding each other why we're here, what our mission is, what we're here to do. And in particular, every business is challenged right now in some way. And I do think that communication is important. I think some small amount of over communication on the most salient points is also super important. But I switched to more of a micro communication model with my leads and team members, stakeholders, my CEO, whoever. Just quick micro communications can go a long way. Wherever possible, we've also just tried to flatten the organization and increase the communication pathways between individuals or teams. There's not a lot of opportunities to randomly run into each other or get into the same room anymore. And so we've tried to sort of flatten, if we can, just increase the communication across the board. But I think in smaller doses. I think, we're all going to get meeting fatigue if we're in 9-10 hours worth of meetings per day. Zoom fatigue, and things of that nature, I think are real.
Yeah.
And I do believe that we need to continue to push. Are we asking each other the right questions every day? Are we doing the right thing for the customer? And we went and reprioritized just to focus on employees and customers, and we'll just look at our business a little bit differently. And if I think about the culture in my team, it's about just continuing what we've done since we've been remote for a long time, but just increase the sort of micro communication. So at least from my perspective, avoid larger meetings wherever possible, just because of the effectiveness and the rich sort of back and forth that may not be occurring. And I think going a little bit toward just checking in and being authentic about it if we can. Are we living our mission and values every day? And it's hard to know that. And I think that's one of the things that we need to think about, which is just how do you check in on that? How do you just look at somebody's work schedule in life and say, are things going well for you? Are we doing the right thing for the customer? So you have to look at those programs, and I've switched my model a little bit to embrace just some of these communication tools that provide the capability. It's not a long email anymore. It's a quick message, right? Whatever message platform you use. It's a quick, authentic message, and we get together when we need to, and that's sort of the way we're sort of pushing the culture. And our mission is to enable economic opportunities worldwide, for people, and we try to live that every day, and we're trying to bring jobs to the platform, pushing things like that. So it's about just checking in how we're doing on our programs, and how can we keep pushing the mission.
That's great. And micro communications, that's a great philosophy. I think it's great. And there's a lot of evidence to support the idea that when we set up a very clear pathway to communication, it has positive results. Professor Barb Larson at Northeastern University wrote this great Harvard Business Review article. It just came out a few weeks ago. It's about how we manage remote teams that are newly remote because of the crisis. And one of the things she said remote work becomes more efficient and intensely more satisfying when managers set expectations for the frequency, the means, and the ideal timing of communication for their teams. Both of you seem like you've done that, and I think that is not only important for how you've been doing it for the last few years, but especially during these times. With that, I want to pivot now and discuss these times, because this current COVID-19 crisis is introducing a lot of new dynamics. I mean, even for experienced remote teams like yours, it's just different. managing remote teams during a crisis, specifically a pandemic, has to really challenge, Christian, the commitment to innovation and move them more towards whatever, survival, get to the next day. Mike, it has to challenge commitments to productivity and staying on OKRs. So I'll start with you, Christian. How do you keep people productive and focused on the mission and the outputs during this pandemic?
Well, I think my first observation, Tim, would be that what we're doing at the moment globally. I think at one point we had more than half the world's population locked down, and if you just actually step back and think about that, I'll use an English analogy here, but I hope it kind of fits. That's 50,000 full Wembley Stadium, which is our national stadium. So you think about, I don't know, maybe the Miami Dolphins Stadium, or you think about 50,000 of those full is the number of people that were locked down. So that alone tells me that the situation that we're in at the moment is not normal, by any stretch of the imagination. I think we're in like week 7 or 8 now at Citrix of a largely mandatory lockdown globally. I would observe that by and large, our experience has actually been really interesting. It's almost being like we've not really missed a beat, but you can't really see that in terms of how it affects each individual. So I think the one thing I would observe is that working during pandemic and working from home or remote working are really not the same thing. The number of people in our house every day, including my own 3 children and my wife or whatever, would not normally be the case if I was working from home for a couple of days a week, because the kids would be at school and everybody would be out doing other things. So I think there's an appreciation that we have for the fact that everybody is literally, quite figuratively, in the same boat. And so, I think picking up a little bit about what Mike said earlier about the communications, and the one thing I've observed, which is really interesting about the fatigue side, is that we're almost robotic in our attendance of meetings like Zoom or GoToMeeting or Microsoft Teams or WebEx or Google Hangout, because it starts at 9 o'clock and it finishes at 10. Then the next one is at 10 and it finishes at 11. And the next one is at 11 and it finishes at 12. And what's been interesting there that I've noticed above anything is that you have to be there exactly as the meeting starts and stay till it ends, where if you're in an office environment, people naturally wander in a couple of minutes late. They have to leave a few minutes early. You're more than happy to just get up and go and plug your laptop in, but in this kind of environment, or the environment that we're in, where we're all kind of, forced to do videos and such every day, as productive as that is, it's also brought a completely different dynamic that I think Mike nailed when he talked about the fact that we got to be careful that we don't burn people out by setting these unreal expectations that would not be the case, because our workday in effect has grown. So we don't have the travel to work time. If we do that as a larger industry, we don't have the travel home from work time. So our window is actually grown during the day. But I think the natural breaks, the things that we would usually do, are fewer and far between. So I think that question about, to get to your point, Tim, about how do we not harm innovation, the best way to harm any innovation and productivity is to burn people out. And I think as an industry, we know we have that problem. We've recognized it. There have been a number of studies. We're seeing startups all over the place focusing on mental health and well-being. So I think, to Mike's point, as a corollary to the concern about innovation, the best way to break that is to burn people out, and we really, really need to be careful. And as Mike said, checking in on the workload, making sure that the managers beneath us understand how to manage those people effectively, I think is going to be super critical as we stay in this lockdown period.
And you're absolutely correct. I mean, a great threat to innovation is the cognitive impairment that comes when a person has an unhealthy relationship with their work, which is the definition of burnout. If nothing else, the research says they lose sleep, they begin to eat the wrong things and drink the wrong things, and their EQ declines. So you're absolutely spot on with that. One of the things you also talked about, and I want to just do a quick follow-up with you, is that people do work a little bit longer, or a lot of bit longer, and they really blur the work-life balance. I heard a manager in some research last week tell me, she said, I have to enforce turn it off and quit working as much as 3 years ago I had to enforce show up to the office on time. So it's like a flip in manager focus. Talk to me if you've got one little hack, one little trick you use to get people to either turn it off or take a recharge day over the weekend. What is that?
I absolutely encourage them to do so. You know, we send regular communications, not just to my team, but across the company, that says, you know, be aware of the environment that you're in at home. It's different. You know, be aware that you haven't got up and you haven't moved for 3 or 4 hours. You know, be aware that you shouldn't respond to every single thing that comes in through every distraction channel. You know, whether that's email alert, Slack alert, text message, WhatsApp, Snapchat. You know, don't feel like you have to respond because you're in an enclosed space. It's not natural. So we absolutely encourage people to do so. You know, it's a little bit also, I would say to him, it's a little bit unique at the moment because obviously lots of locations around the world are truly locked down to the point that even physical exercise externally has not been possible just since the last couple of days. So, you know, I think that observation you make about let's not push people to the point where, you know, they become burnt out or they start to pick up bad habits, because it's very, very easy to fall into those longer term and super difficult to shake them off. You know, even when the lockdown is released and we begin our gradual return to offices or return to normality, whatever that looks like. So yeah, I mean, we do it actively, and you know, we have all sorts of truly social channels within our Slack environment, as an example, that encourage people to have virtual coffee. You know, drop in between 9 and 11, you know, shoot the breeze, get a coffee, ask a question, talk about your dog, talk about your cat, distract yourself from work, and don't feel like you have to program that. Whenever you feel a natural break, just as you would go to the coffee machine in an office, or you might go to take a trip to a Starbucks or whatever, please do that in the virtual world until we can figure it out for real.
That's great. That is absolutely great. Mike, I want to throw this question to you. So, you know, managing a distributed team during a pandemic is certainly different. There's a higher level of distractions, there's stress, there's uncertainty. Talk to me about how you've kept people on point, on productivity, and continuing to think outside the box during these times.
Yeah, I think you're right, Tim, and Christian referred to it earlier. Like, working during this pandemic is very different than working from home or working remotely. And I think, you know, none of us expected to be in the same location working as our entire family might be, right? Or the fact that you can't easily go to your normal exercise routine. The gym is closed, right? So how do you work those things into your schedule, right? We've got like morning yoga, we've got employee resource groups, we have, you know, virtual water coolers, virtual happy hours. We're trying to encourage those things. And I think most of us living through this pandemic have discovered all kinds of new ways to even communicate with our friends and family. I mean, you know, the amount of years that have gone by that I haven't used those tools to remote with my friends is interesting. Now that I do it all the time, I'm like, why didn't we do this earlier? And the same can be said on the opposite side from a work standpoint. Why didn't I balance my work schedule during the day or even throughout the week to adjust to what I need to do to take care of myself, my family, you know, just to make sure that there's that balance that Christian talked about earlier in your work life. And we want to be getting rest. We want to be, you know, just innovative. You need to have your brain and your body functioning properly. And I think, you know, getting up to walk around during phone calls or videos should be acceptable, right? Like going outside and going for a small walk if you can, if your geography, if where you live allows that. You know, those are things I try to encourage people. And most importantly, take the time when you need the time. You know, own your schedule is really, like, you know, people will ping me saying, I'm going to take off. I'm like, listen, you should, and you need to own your schedule and plan it out and make sure that you're baking in the right amount of time intraday or intra week at least to do the things you need to do. You know, we've got to relieve our spouses and our significant others. Like, there's just things that you have to think through right now. And I think working during this pandemic is a little bit different than hopefully when we normalize things and get looking at how do we do this, you know, for the long haul. You know, the distractions at home, the challenges of not being able to go out won't be present forever. And I think ultimately that's a good thing, but we have to sort of get through it right now. So I'm just encouraging people to take the time when they need to balance intraday, get a bicycle, you know, a stationary thing. Like, there's lots of things you can do to keep active, keep your, you know, your body and your mind healthy and happy. And, you know, just in general, I think like you mentioned earlier, Tim, just keep communicating. I mean, yeah, I don't know about you guys, but my work life is part of my social, like, just my life in general. And I've always lived that way. I never felt that work-life balance was a challenge because people I meet at work are friends, right? And I think about them as colleagues, but also more than that. And I think if you interact with them in that way during the workday and during the work week, your life, you can think about your social connections being pretty well rounded at this point. But how do you balance that with, making sure you get your other things done, and you don't sit in your desk like literally for 12 hours a day? It's going to be a problem. There's no amount of ergonomics that will help you with that. So I think just balancing it would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important point you make. We've got to protect time on our calendar. So you advocate then a person should look at that daily calendar knowing that if others see that gap, they'll take it, right? And you block out time to do things like exercise, like walk your dog, whatever. Is that what you're saying?
I do. I mean, it used to be things like end of day wrap up or commute time, but that's been replaced with um, I need to exit to help my children and make dinner, like things of that nature that I think wouldn't ordinarily show up in someone's calendar, but thinking through your whole day ahead would be good. And then just like weekends, it's easy to keep going on Slack and email. I think you have to try to take some time away. Wherever possible, I try to help encourage people to do that. One of my team members took off on Friday, and I think they just getting your things organized in the morning or the night before would be helpful to know that you can just take that day off and we're gonna be fine without you. These things were always there, but they're more heightened now that I realize the person is still available to work. And I think you have to really force yourself to say, yes, my computer is next to me. I didn't actually go to the beach today, since the beach is closed. But you really have to force yourself to just put those electronics down and take a recharge day. I know at Upwork we did a company-wide recharge day where we could, and now 100% of employees did not do it, but they've looked at taking it at some point. But we tried to do a company-wide recharge day just to take a breather, because I think that we've been working hard for our customers and our employees, and we want to do that over the long haul, not the short term. We don't want to burn out, as Christian said earlier. Burnout is a real challenge, and we want to avoid it.
Christian, a quick follow-up from you. Is there a way that you help people protect time on their calendar?
Yeah, it's a challenge, as Mike will certainly relate to. We have a globally distributed team, so trying to find the perfect time to have, even a regular catch-up meeting is difficult when you have people on the west coast of the US and people in Sydney, Australia. So trying to find an exact time that doesn't help for that sort of thing. But look, I mean, I think Mike made a great point there. I would like to say that certainly within my team and with many other people that I interact with around Citrix, we're kind of all friends, right? So, people will have their kids kind of wander in and chat on calls or whatever. And, social interactions that you simply don't get in a normal world, which actually I think they make you more human, which is great, by the way.
Yes.
But, I mean, listen, I think it's relatively simple. We know that people feel incumbent on making every meeting that's in the calendar, and we've just said, look, if it doesn't work for you, it's perfectly fine to turn it down. It's highly unlikely that Citrix or Upwork will disappear because you didn't commit to one meeting at 11 p.m. at night when you weren't even on the agenda, but you felt like you needed to be there because there's a presenteeism factor. And I think that presenteeism factor is a real danger in the remote world in general. Go back to what I said earlier about the balance, having people involved enough versus involved too much. So we say, look, if you don't feel like you're going to contribute to the meeting, or you feel like you'd rather read the minutes of the meeting, or you'd rather watch the recording when you're going for your daily walk, or while listen to the recording, that's fine. Don't feel like you have to be at every single thing. And again, I think this worry I have about burnout, extends beyond the boundaries of Citrix into the industry in general. I think we're probably, with the exception of some of the things that we see at the moment with first responders and healthcare professionals around the world who are seeing things orders of magnitude more difficult than we're talking about today. I think our industry is probably right at the front of the one that carries the most stress and risk. And and as Mike alluded to, anything we can do to stop that by just literally uninviting people to meetings as well is a great one. It's a little bit of a strange one at first because people take it the wrong way, but actually uninviting people and saying, look, you don't need to be at this meeting. Don't feel like you have to attend it. I'd rather let you have less busy time and more, headroom to work on stuff that's useful rather than you sit there and listen in. So, I think uninviting people, if you do it in the right way, and I have the conversation with the individual about why, is actually, super beneficial for productivity.
Absolutely. To your point about burnout, I saw some research last year, and they tried to identify the different occupations that have the highest degree of burnout. Of course, number one was healthcare provider emergency room, number one. Number two, enterprise salesperson, B2B. Number three was technologist. Number four, police firemen. So you're absolutely correct. Especially in technology, it's a real threat. Let's go to a lightning round question here. When you hear discussions around remote work, it always falls in three buckets: work from anywhere, work from home during a crisis, and just general remote work. And Mike, each of them are different. How does this change in the future?
Well, I think that the future, hopefully we won't be in this crisis, but we'll still be working remotely more than ever. I think we'll move to more like asynchronous communication wherever possible. I think just so that we don't get that meeting fatigue or that sort of burnout. I do think that we'll have to distribute authority, provide more autonomous, smaller teams that are more innovative and flexible. So I think that the future of remote work is going to be different than the crisis we're in today. I think that it'll be normalized a bit with some more balance, and as well as real thinking about how to not just take an office and everybody works from home. Think about how to make scalable structures that can make the right decisions. And as you said, Tim, earlier, we operate services. We don't, well, in my industry, we don't write the software and then ship it, right? We're operating a service itself, and in Christians, it's the same way. So we're really on 24/7. So thinking about how to do that globally, how to enable teams and be more autonomous and innovative. And I think right now we're in the pandemic phase where it's a little bit crazier than we'd like. And so I think the future looks just a little bit different than it does today.
Okay. Christian, same question to you. Again, it's always been three buckets: work from anywhere, work from home during a pandemic, or just general remote work. And how do you think that's going to change moving forward?
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different observation, Tim, again, just from, the sort of the Citrix perspective and the very privileged vantage point we have across lots of different customers who do different things. I would probably make the observation, first of all, I don't think that all remote work is work from home, but I think that all work from home is a form of remote work. And I'll tell you why I say that, because if you think about, delivery drivers, whether that's full-time or gig economy, whether that's, an Uber driver, whether that's a maintenance engineer, whether that's an airline pilot, they are a form of remote work that has technology requirements that connect them to application systems and other people, but they don't work from home primarily. So I think if you think about work from home as one element, and a very important element of remote work, I also think it's going to end up in sort of, I would say, three different structures as we reach what I call the next normal. I don't like the new normal because I think it's a bit of a strange phrase, but the next normal seems more logical to me. And I think what we'll see is that lots of organizations around the world who were maybe a little bit reluctant to fully endorse work from home because, it will never work for us, will have had it proven to them that in fact it can work for them. So I think we'll see, permanent work from home as an option, and I use that word strongly, for some roles in some organizations. I think we'll see a more structured work from home where you say maybe pick 1 or 2 days a week constantly to do that. And then I think the third thing will be an ad hoc work from home where maybe you decide, I'm going to do the Thursday this week because I'm waiting for, the laundry machine repairman, but I can work from home. All three of those have a similar technology thread, but of course they're different from a sort of a longevity perspective in terms of the way you address it. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I certainly, to Mike's point and the points we made earlier, I certainly don't think the mode that we're in now will become the default mode as the world exits. I certainly don't think that. But I certainly do believe that this will accelerate digital transformation. I think it will make cloud even more relevant than it was pre-COVID and pre-coronavirus. And I think organizations will be wrestling with changes in policy from a HR perspective, changes in flexible work, but also looking outside and hopefully, into the lens of Upwork about actually how do we deal with people who want to work differently? How do we package our work differently? How do we execute that work differently? Who are these people? Where are these people? And can we truly drive to what a lot of analysts say will become more contingent and more gig work? I think this is a great breeding ground for that. And as people return to work, having been either furloughed or unfortunately laid off, I think it brings a huge amount of opportunity for new ways of working, both with engagement models and also with the technology.
Absolutely. That's a great addition to the conversation. As I've traveled, well, as I used to travel around the country visiting our clients, I'm meeting more and more people whose job has the word talent innovation in the title. And I think they're going to be very busy over the coming years, because I think that the expectations of talent will also change as they become more familiar. Mike, I want to just kind of readdress that question to you, but before I do that, we're about 4 minutes and change away from the Q&A. For those of you that want to ask a question, please send it via email to wwl@upwork.com. That's wwl@upwork.com. Mike, the question's over to you. How do you see the crisis and the experience people are having working from home? How do you see that changing the way that all teams and organizations operate moving forward?
Well, I think, as we said before, you're really faced with an opportunity as well as challenges. The opportunity is to look at the skill gaps that we have, to look at the things that we've always wanted to do that were relatively difficult to do given existing constraints or structural impediments that we had put in place. As Christian said, it will never work, or it could range to real challenges with the way the company or the departments are structured. So I think it's a great opportunity to look at, leveling the playing field a little bit and thinking about how do we just find the opportunities that we've always wanted to fund, or do we have skill gaps in our organization that we can suddenly find? I mean, if we can do this remotely across the globe, like in Christian's organization or in mine, there should be no barriers that prevent us from getting the talent that we need in the places that we need it, whether or not it's to support a service or build something innovative. And I think it's a really empowering, enlightening thing to think about. I know we're in a crisis. I know that it's at all times the best and the worst of us, right? And I think that if I look at the future, I'm thinking optimistically about this gives us an opportunity to solve some of the structural, like, skill gap problems or talent problems that we've had. Say, like, we can do this, and it will take some innovative capabilities, some work to restructure processes and things like that. But really, I think there should be nothing stopping us now from being the best that we can. And I do hope that as we exit the crisis, we're better off for it. I think it'll allow us to, just another tool in the toolbox, right? It's a balance. We are going to still have get-togethers in offices and things like that. It's not going to be 100% remote for every company across the board. But just looking at the talent pool alone, the ability to work from anywhere is just, it opens a lot of opportunities. So I'm excited to see that for the future.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. I want to remind everybody watching the webinar, if you have a question, send that to wwl@upwork.com. Christian, I want to thank you for your time today, for your candor, and for your transparency in kind of bringing us into your world. Mike, same to you. I have taken a lot away from our conversation today. It's going to be kind of a greatest hits for me today on LinkedIn, just repeating some of the great things I've heard. Not all, as you said, Christian, my favorite one was that not all remote work is work from home, but all work from home is remote work. That's going to be in a fortune cookie at some technology company cafeteria coming soon. Mike, your greatest hit for me was the value of micro communications. Doesn't have to be this formal 30-minute meeting. As you told me once, in just a few minutes, you can pull them back in. I really hope people take that away from this conversation. I think you're both just remarkable leaders and managers, but more importantly, you've shown us you're just remarkable people. It's been a pleasure to spend the last 45 minutes with you. Thank you so much. And for everybody watching, this is the last time I'll say it, but please do send your question in for the live question and answer period that is to follow. That's wwl@upwork.com. This is Tim Sanders, Vice President, Customer Insights at Upwork. Thank you very much for tuning in.